Hello, my dear lore seekers. Welcome back to another evening of shared stories. Tonight, we journey into the heart of one of the wizarding world's most profound and perilous legends. It is a story that begins as a simple children's fable, whispered by firesides to teach a lesson about mortality, but it unfolds across centuries into a history of ambition, bloodshed, and the deepest secrets of magic itself. Settle in, quiet your mind, and let us explore the complete history of three mythical objects: the brilliant, flawed, and legendary figures who first possessed them, and the shadow they cast over the greatest wizards of the modern age. Tonight, we deconstruct the Deathly Hallows. Your support allows us to continue unearthing these stories. If you found value in our time together, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for the many journeys yet to come. Let's begin tonight's story. Our story begins, as all the best stories do, in the pages of a book. Not a history, not a tome of arcane law, but a simple collection of fairy tales intended for young witches and wizards, titled The Tales of Beedle the Bard. For generations, wizarding parents have read these stories to their children, much as muggles might read the tales of the Brothers Grimm or Hans Christian Andersen. And among these tales of hopping pots and hairy hearts, there is one that stands apart. A story more somber, more resonant, and possessed of a truth far deeper than its simple prose might suggest. It is called The Tale of the Three Brothers. There were once three brothers who were traveling along a lonely, winding road at twilight. In time, the brothers reached a river, too deep to wade through and too dangerous to swim across. However, these brothers were learned in the magical arts, and so they simply waved their wands and made a bridge appear across the treacherous water. They were halfway across it when they found their path blocked by a hooded figure, and it was Death. He was angry that he had been cheated out of 3 new victims, for travelers usually drowned in the river. But Death was cunning. He pretended to congratulate the 3 brothers upon their magic, and said that each had earned a prize for having been clever enough to evade him. So the oldest brother, who was a combative man, asked for a wand more powerful than any in existence. A wand that must always win duels for its owner. A wand worthy of a wizard who had conquered death. So Death crossed to an elder tree on the banks of the river, fashioned a wand from a branch that hung there, and gave it to the oldest brother. Then the second brother, who was an arrogant man, decided that he wanted to humiliate Death still further, and asked for the power to recall others from Death. So Death picked up a stone from the riverbank and gave it to the second brother, and told him that the stone would have the power to bring back the dead. And then Death asked the third and youngest brother what he would like. The youngest brother was the humblest and also the wisest of the brothers, and he did not trust Death. So he asked for something that would enable him to go forth from that place without being followed by Death. And Death, most unwillingly, handed over his own Cloak of Invisibility. Then Death stood aside and allowed the 3 brothers to continue on their way, and they did so, talking with wonder of the adventure they had had, and admiring Death's gifts. In due course, the brothers separated, each for his own destination. The first brother traveled on for a week or more, and reaching a distant village, sought out a fellow wizard with whom he had a quarrel. Naturally, with the Elder Wand as his weapon, he could not fail to win the duel that followed. Leaving his enemy dead upon the floor, the oldest brother proceeded to an inn, where he boasted loudly of the powerful wand he had snatched from Death himself, and of how it made him invincible. That very night, another wizard crept upon the oldest brother as he lay, wine-sodden upon his bed. The thief took the wand and, for good measure, slit the oldest brother's throat. And so Death took the first brother for his own. Meanwhile, the second brother journeyed to his own home, where he lived alone. Here he took out the stone that had the power to recall the dead, and turned it thrice in his hand. To his amazement and his delight, the figure of the girl he had once hoped to marry before her untimely death appeared at once before him. Yet she was sad and cold, separated from him as by a veil. Though she had returned to the mortal world, she did not truly belong there and suffered. Finally, the second brother, driven mad with hopeless longing, killed himself so as truly to join her. And so Death took the second brother for his own. But though Death searched for the third brother for many years, he was never able to find him. It was only when he had attained a great age that the youngest brother finally took off the Cloak of Invisibility and gave it to his son. And then he greeted Death as an old friend, and went with him gladly, and, as equals, they departed this life. This, then, is the story as it has been told for centuries. A simple, elegant fable with a clear moral that attempts to defy or dominate death through power or arrogance are doomed to fail, while wisdom lies in accepting mortality and living a full life until death comes as a natural end. For most of the wizarding world, that is all it is, a story. But as with many legends, a kernel of profound truth lies buried within the fiction. The first to publicly suggest this was none other than Albus Dumbledore, who, in his personal annotations on the tales of Beedle the Bard, proposed a radical theory. He argued that the tale was not a literal account of an encounter with a personified death. Rather, he believed it was a myth that had sprung up around three real objects of immense power, created not by death, but by three exceptionally gifted and dangerous wizards. This perspective shifts our understanding entirely. The story becomes less a supernatural fable, and more a piece of allegorical history. The personification of death, in Dumbledore's view, was a clever narrative device, a way for the story to explain the creation of artifacts so powerful they seem to defy the natural laws of life and death. It is, after all, a common human tendency, both in the Muggle and wizarding worlds, to attribute to divine or supernatural forces that which we cannot easily explain through our own ingenuity. A story about a cunning death bestowing gifts is far more memorable, and perhaps more palatable, than a story about three brilliant but potentially reckless wizards creating objects that could destabilize the world. The legend, therefore, serves as both a record and a warning, cloaking a dangerous historical truth in the guise of a children's fairy tale. The wizards in question, Dumbledore concluded, were the Peverell brothers, Antioch, Cadmus, and Ignotus. living in the 13th century. They were an ancient and powerful pure-blood family, and the historical reality behind the three brothers of the tale. Their names, long since faded from common knowledge, and their family line extinguished in the male line, were preserved in this one enduring story. And the objects they created, which the tale calls Death's Gifts, came to be known by another name among the few who believed in their existence: the Deathly Hallows. In deconstructing this legend, we find that the Hallows are not merely powerful magical items. They are perfect, almost poetic, manifestations of their creators' personalities and desires. The choices the brothers make in the tale reveal everything about their character, their flaws, and their understanding of the world. Antioch, described as a combative man, desires ultimate power, a tool for dominance and victory. His creation, the Elder Wand, is precisely that: a weapon of conquest designed to make its wielder unbeatable. It is an object born of a desire to impose one's will upon the world. Cadmus, the arrogant man, seeks to humiliate death itself by reversing its finality. His creation, the Resurrection Stone, is a monument to that arrogance, an attempt to defy the most fundamental law of nature out of personal grief and pride. It is an object born of an inability to accept loss. And then there is Ignotus, the humblest and also the wisest of the three. He does not seek power over others or over nature. He simply asks for a means to live his life without being pursued, to protect himself and his family. His creation, the Invisibility Cloak, is a tool of quiet protection, of evasion rather than confrontation. It is an object born of wisdom and a desire for a peaceful, natural life. The Hallows, therefore, are not random gifts. They are the physical embodiments of three distinct philosophies for confronting mortality. They are, in a very real sense, extensions of their creators' souls, and the history of each Hallow is a direct consequence of the philosophy that created it. The story of the Deathly Hallows is not just the story of three magical objects. It is the story of three powerful ideas unleashed upon the world and the centuries of bloodshed, sorrow, and wisdom that followed in their wake. And to understand them, we must trace the journey of each Hallow, beginning with the most notorious, the most coveted, and the most blood-soaked of them all, the Elder Wand. The legacy of the Elder Wand is a story written in blood, a crimson thread running through the tapestry of wizarding history. Its journey begins and ends in violence, a perfect reflection of the combative spirit of its creator, Antioch Peveril. As the tale recounts, Antioch's first act upon receiving the wand was to seek out a rival and kill him in a duel. His second act was to retire to an inn and boast loudly of his newfound invincibility, proclaiming that he wielded a wand snatched from death himself. In these two actions, Antioch sealed not only his own fate, but the fate of the wand for centuries to come. He defined it as a tool of violence and a symbol of arrogance. That very night, as he lay in a wine-sodden sleep, a thief crept into his room, slit his throat, and stole the wand. This first brutal transfer of ownership established the fundamental law of the Elder Wand. It does not pass by inheritance or by gift. Its allegiance is won only through conquest. It is loyal not to a person, but to power itself. From its very inception, the wand was tied to a cycle of desire, violence, and betrayal. Its immense power inspires a lust for dominance, which inevitably leads to boasting or exposure, which in turn invites challengers, culminating in a violent transfer of mastery. This deadly pattern would repeat itself time and again, earning the wand its many names: the Wand of Destiny, the Death Stick, and, of course, the Elder Wand. After the anonymous murder of Antioch Peveril, the wand vanished into the mists of history, its trail growing cold. It re-emerged in the early Middle Ages, in the hands of a wizard whose name became synonymous with its brutal power: Emmerich the Evil. Described as an exceptionally aggressive wizard, Emmerich used the wand to carve a path of terror across the south of England. His reign, though fearsome, was short-lived. The story of Emmerich is significant because it provides the first major challenge to the legend of the wand's invincibility. The tale, told by Beadle the Bard, claims the wand must always win duels for its owner. Yet historical records, as noted by Dumbledore, show that Emmerich the Evil was slain in a fierce duel by another wizard known as Egbert the Egregious. This event is critically important. It proves that the fable is an exaggeration. The Elder Wand is supremely powerful, perhaps the most powerful wand ever created, but it is not infallible. It does not grant absolute invincibility. It amplifies the skill and power of its wielder, but it cannot compensate for a lack of it. A sufficiently powerful or clever opponent could, and did, defeat its master in a direct confrontation. Egbert's victory over Emmerich is one of only 2 known instances in history where the master of the Elder Wand was defeated in a formal duel, the other being Dumbledore's legendary defeat of Grindelwald centuries later. This crucial detail reveals that the wand's power is a significant advantage, but not a guarantee of victory. Skill, circumstance, and perhaps even the will of the wand itself all play their part. After Egbert's victory, the wand's trail once again goes cold for nearly a century. What became of Egbert the Egregious is unknown, though Dumbledore dryly noted that the life expectancy of medieval duelists was generally short. When the wand resurfaces, it is in the possession of a very different kind of master, one who saw its potential not just as a weapon, but as a source of forbidden knowledge. His name was Godelot. Godelot was a dark wizard who viewed the Elder Wand as a mentor, a most wicked and subtle friend. He used its immense power to delve deeper into the dark arts than many of his predecessors. His primary legacy is a grimoire of dangerous spells he authored, a book titled Magic Moste Evil. This book is a pivotal object in wizarding history for one specific reason. It is the only text in the entire Hogwarts library, even within the restricted section, that is known to contain a reference to the creation of Horcruxes. though it only mentions them to condemn them as the wickedest of magical inventions before refusing to speak further on the matter. Its existence provides a tangible, historical link between the two great obsessions of the wizarding world's quest to conquer death: the Deathly Hallows and the Horcruxes. The implication is profound. The Elder Wand, one of the three Hallows, was the very instrument used to record and preserve the knowledge of Horcruxes. It suggests that the wand is more than just a conduit for powerful spells. It is a key, a repository of all magical knowledge, including its darkest and most dangerous secrets. The quest for one path to mastering death through the Hallows led directly to the documentation of the other through the splitting of the soul. This creates a deep and tragic irony that would echo centuries later, when Lord Voldemort, the most infamous creator of Horcruxes, would hunt the Elder Wand, unknowingly seeking the very artifact that had helped preserve the dark magic upon which his entire existence was built. Godelot's story, however, ends in the familiar, bloody fashion of the wand's history. His pursuit of knowledge did not save him from the wand's curse of violence. He was murdered by his own son, Hereward, who coveted the wand for himself. Hereward did not challenge his father to a duel. Instead, he locked Godelot in his cellar and left him to die, stealing the wand as his father wasted away. Following Hereward, the wand's path once again fades into obscurity, only to reappear in the early 18th century. It was then possessed by a warlock named Barnabas Deverell, who used it to build a fearsome reputation for himself. Deverell's reign was ended by the dreadful Loxias, who killed him and took the wand for himself. It was Loxias who gave the wand its most sinister moniker, the Death Stick. He was a notoriously cruel wizard who used the wand to slaughter anyone who displeased him, cementing its reputation as an object of pure, unadulterated violence. The end of Loxias is a testament to the chaos he sowed. His death is shrouded in mystery, with so many enemies that no one is certain who finally struck him down. Dumbledore notes that many claim the credit, including, chillingly, Loxias's own mother. After Loxias, the trail becomes murky, with Xenophilius Lovegood suggesting it may have passed to wizards named Arcus or Livius, but the history is uncertain. The modern and most well-documented chapter of the Elder Wand's history begins in the late 19th or early 20th century, when it came into the possession of the celebrated European wand maker Michiel Gregorovich. Unlike his predecessors, Gregorovich was not a dark wizard seeking power, but a craftsman fascinated by the wand's legendary properties. He studied it, attempting to reverse engineer its secrets and duplicate its power, hoping to improve his own wand-making business. But, like Antioch Peverell so long ago, he made the fatal mistake of boasting. He let slip rumors that he was in possession of the legendary Elder Wand and was studying it. This boast reached the ears of a brilliant, ambitious, and dangerous young wizard who was just beginning his own quest for the Hallows, a young Gellert Grindelwald. One night, Grindelwald broke into Gregorovich's workshop, stunned the wand maker, and stole the Elder Wand, becoming its new master. With the Elder Wand in his possession, Grindelwald began his reign of terror across Europe, gathering an army and seeking to impose a new world order, with wizards ruling over muggles for the greater good. For decades, he was considered the most dangerous dark wizard in the world. His power, amplified by the Elder Wand, seemed unstoppable. Only one wizard was considered his equal, his former friend, Albus Dumbledore. For years, Dumbledore hesitated to confront him, for reasons we will explore later. But finally, in 1945, the two wizards met in what is remembered as the most legendary duel in wizarding history. Dumbledore emerged victorious, and Grindelwald was imprisoned in Nurmengard, the very prison he had built for his enemies. With this victory, the allegiance of the Elder Wand passed to Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore's stewardship of the wand was unique in its long and violent history. He was, perhaps, its first master since Ignotus Peveril's time who understood its true danger. He never boasted of it. He used its power not for conquest, but for good, performing incredible feats of magic while working to keep the wand's identity a secret. He intended to be its final master, arranging for his own death at the hands of Severus Snape, believing that if he died undefeated, the wand's power would be broken forever. But the wand, with its own peculiar and ruthless logic, had other ideas. Dumbledore's plan was elegant, but it contained a fatal flaw, a misunderstanding of the wand's fundamental nature. He, like so many before him, assumed that mastery was tied to killing. But on the night of his death, high atop the astronomy tower, before Snape could fulfill his promise, Dumbledore was disarmed by Draco Malfoy. With a simple Expelliarmus, a non-lethal spell, Draco defeated the master of the Elder Wand. In that instant, without anyone knowing it, not even Draco himself, the allegiance of the most powerful wand in the world passed to a terrified, reluctant schoolboy. This subtle shift in allegiance is the linchpin upon which the final act of the Wizarding War turns. Lord Voldemort, obsessed with the wand, believed its power lay with Snape, the man who had killed Dumbledore. After desecrating Dumbledore's tomb and taking the physical wand, he murdered Snape, believing this would make him its true master. But the wand never answered to him properly, for it was not Snape's to give. Its loyalty lay with Draco Malfoy. And then, in the chaos of a skirmish at Malfoy Manor, Harry Potter, in a desperate struggle, physically wrestled Draco's own hawthorn wand from his grasp. This act of forceful defeat, of overpowering Draco, was enough. Miles away, locked in Voldemort's grip, the Elder Wand changed its allegiance once more, binding itself to Harry Potter. Voldemort's entire philosophy was built on power, murder, and dominance, yet he could never grasp the wand's subtle but absolute rule. Its allegiance is won by defeat, not necessarily by death. This nuance, this rule hidden in plain sight, was a piece of magic his brutal, unsubtle mind could never comprehend, and it was this misunderstanding that would ultimately lead to his downfall. The bloody trail of the Elder Wand, which began with a murder in a quiet inn, finally ended not with a grand duel, but with a desperate scuffle in a drawing room, its power passing to a boy who had never sought it, and who would be the first master in centuries, wise enough to let its power die. While the Elder Wand carved its violent path through history, the Second Hallow, the Resurrection Stone, followed a quieter but no less tragic journey. Its story is not one of conquest and power, but of grief, obsession, and the slow decay of a once proud lineage. Its legacy begins with the second brother, Cadmus Peveril. Described in the tale as an arrogant man, Cadmus's desire was to humiliate death by reclaiming what it had taken. He used the stone to call back the spirit of the woman he had loved and hoped to marry before her untimely death. But the woman who returned was not truly alive. She was a shade, cold and sorrowful, separated from the mortal world by a veil, and her presence brought him not joy, but torment. She did not belong, and she suffered for it. Driven mad by this hopeless, unbridgeable gap between life and death, Cadmus took his own life, hoping to finally and truly join her. Cadmus's tragedy is the archetypal cautionary tale of the Hallows. It illustrates the profound and painful truth that Dumbledore would later articulate, that there are some things worse than death, and that meddling with its finality is the surest path to suffering. The stone does not offer resurrection. It offers a cruel parody of it, a hollow echo that only deepens the grief of the one who wields it. After Cadmus's suicide, the stone was set into a simple gold ring, engraved with what his descendants would come to believe was the Peveril coat of arms. This ring was passed down through the generations of his family. Over time, the Peveril bloodline mingled with another ancient and powerful lineage, that of Salazar Slytherin. The two families joined sometime between the 13th and 18th centuries, and the ring became the prized heirloom of the new dynasty that emerged from this union, the House of Gaunt. The story of the House of Gaunt is a grim narrative of decline. They were a family consumed by a fanatical pride in their pure-blood heritage, a pride that stood in stark contrast to their reality of squalor, poverty, and instability. They clung to the glory of their ancestors, Slytherin and Peveril, even as their family fortune dwindled to nothing and generations of inbreeding left them violent, unstable, and isolated. The Gaunts who lived in the early 20th century, Marvolo, and his children Morphin and Merope, inhabited a filthy shack in Little Hangleton, their only remaining treasures being two heirlooms, Slytherin's locket and the Peveril ring. Marvolo Gaunt cherished the ring above all else, wearing it as a symbol of his noble ancestry. He would boast of the Peveril coat of arms engraved upon the stone, completely oblivious to its true nature as the Resurrection Stone. For centuries, the stone's incredible power lay dormant, not because it was lost, but because its owners were too consumed by their own prejudices to recognize it. Their obsession with the symbolism of blood purity had blinded them to the real, potent magic they held in their hands. The Gaunts' tragedy was not that they misused the stone as Cadmus had, but that they were utterly incapable of understanding it. Its necromantic power was lost on them, replaced by the empty pride of a signet ring on the finger of a broken man. The final degradation of the stone came at the hands of the last of the Gaunt line, Marvolo's grandson, Tom Riddle. After learning of his heritage, a young Voldemort sought out his uncle, Morphin Gaunt, and stole the ring. Like his ancestors, he was ignorant of the stone's true identity as a Hallow. He saw it only as a relic of his Slytherin heritage, a potent symbol of his claim to greatness. Seeking immortality through the darkest of means, Voldemort took the ring to the home of his estranged Muggle father, murdered him and his grandparents, and used this triple murder to perform a horrific act of desecration. He transformed the Resurrection Stone, a Deathly Hallow, into a Horcrux, defiling it with a fragment of his own mutilated soul. This act is the ultimate perversion of the Hallow's nature. An object created from a desire to bridge the gap with the dead was twisted into a vessel used to unnaturally anchor a soul to the world of the living, preventing death altogether. Voldemort then hid the ring in the ruins of the Gaunt shack, protecting it with a powerful and deadly curse, where it lay for decades. The stone's tragic story culminates in one final temptation, a test for the wisest wizard of the age. After years of hunting Voldemort's Horcruxes, Albus Dumbledore finally located the Gaunt ring. He recognized it immediately, not just as a Horcrux, but as the long-lost Resurrection Stone, the Hallow he had craved most in his youth. In that moment, Dumbledore, the great and wise headmaster, was overcome by a lifetime of grief and regret, particularly for the death of his sister, Ariana. Forgetting that the ring was a Horcrux, forgetting all his own warnings about the lure of power, he was driven by a desperate, human longing to see his family again. He put the ring on. The curse Voldemort had placed upon it took hold instantly. It withered Dumbledore's hand, turning it black and dead, and began to spread through his body, a fatal affliction that not even his immense power could halt completely. Though Snape was able to contain it, the curse marked the beginning of the end for Dumbledore, placing a countdown on his remaining life. This moment of profound weakness is perhaps the most humanizing in Dumbledore's story. It demonstrates that no one, not even the wizard who understood the dangers of the Hallows better than anyone, was immune to their temptations. His failure with the stone is a direct parallel to Cadmus Peveril's. Both were brilliant men, undone by their inability to accept the finality of death and let go of their lost loved ones. It is the ultimate proof of the tale's moral. The desire to reverse death is the most powerful and perilous temptation of all, a siren song of grief capable of luring even the greatest of minds to their ruin. After destroying the Horcrux within it, Dumbledore hid the stone inside the first golden snitch Harry Potter ever caught, bequeathing it to him in his will, ensuring that the stone would only reveal itself to Harry when he too was ready to face the end. In stark contrast to the bloody trail of the Elder Wand and the tragic legacy of the Resurrection Stone, the third Hallow, the Cloak of Invisibility, followed a path of quiet humility and steadfast protection. Its history is not a chronicle of conquest or grief, but a simple, unbroken line of familial inheritance, a testament to the wisdom of its creator, Ignotus Peverell. Ignotus, the youngest and wisest of the three brothers, understood the true nature of his encounter on that twilight road. He saw death not as an adversary to be beaten or a force to be undone, but as an inescapable part of life to be respected. He did not ask for power over others, nor for the ability to defy the natural order. He simply asked for a way to live out his days in peace, free from death's pursuit, until he was ready. Death, the tale says, unwillingly gave him his own cloak. With this gift, Ignotus was able to raise his family in safety, hidden from those who might wish him harm, and, indeed, from death itself. He lived to a great age, and only when he had lived a full and satisfying life did he finally take off the cloak, pass it to his son, and greet death as an old friend, departing this life as an equal. Ignotus's story is the moral heart of the tale. It defines the true meaning of mastering death, not through defiance, but through acceptance. His choice reveals a profound wisdom. He recognized that the greatest power is not the ability to command or to change the world, but the ability to live in it peacefully and protect those you love. This philosophy is imbued in the very nature of the cloak he created, unlike the other two Hallows, which are tools of action and ambition, inviting their owners to conquer, to kill, to resurrect. The cloak is an instrument of quiet defense. It does not tempt its owner to grand, world-altering deeds, but rather offers them a means of navigating the world safely. This inherent humility is the reason it never accumulated a history of bloodshed and betrayal. Its power is in its purpose, not its prowess, because it serves to protect rather than to project power. It does not inspire the greed, the arrogance, or the grief-driven madness that defines its counterparts. It is the only Hallow that could be passed down peacefully, a true family heirloom, and so it was. The cloak was handed down from parent to eldest child through the generations of the Peveril family. For centuries, its existence was a closely guarded secret. Eventually, the male line of Ignotus's descendants died out, and the cloak was inherited by his granddaughter, Iolanthe Peveril. Iolanthe married a young wizard named Hardwin Potter, the eldest son of Linfred of Stinchcombe, a well-liked and eccentric potioneer from the 12th century who is credited as the founder of the Potter family. Upon their marriage, the Cloak of Invisibility passed into the Potter line, continuing its tradition of being handed down to the eldest heir of each new generation. For centuries, the Potter family possessed this extraordinary artifact. It is likely that, over time, its true origin as a fabled Deathly Hallow was forgotten, lost to family lore. To them, it was simply a unique and exceptionally well-made invisibility cloak, a treasured family heirloom, but nothing more. It was passed down until it reached James Potter. A gifted but rebellious student at Hogwarts, James, along with his friends Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew the Marauders, used the cloak extensively for their mischief, sneaking around the castle and its grounds after dark. Shortly before his death, James showed the cloak to Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore, who had spent his youth obsessed with the Hallows, immediately suspected its true nature. He recognized it as something far more than a simple charmed cloak. Its ability to repel spells and its enduring power marked it as the fabled Cloak of Ignotus Peveril. He asked to borrow it for study, and James, unaware of its full significance, agreed. It was for this reason that the cloak was in Dumbledore's possession on the night that James and Lily Potter were murdered by Lord Voldemort. Dumbledore held on to the cloak for a decade. Then, on Harry Potter's first Christmas at Hogwarts, he returned it to its rightful heir. He sent it to Harry anonymously with a simple note. "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well." With this act, Dumbledore set the final chapter of the Hallows story in motion. The first piece of the puzzle was placed in the hands of the boy who would unknowingly be destined to unite them all. From that moment on, the Cloak of Ignotus Peverell served its original purpose once more. It became Harry's constant protector, a shield that allowed him to survive, to investigate, and to ultimately fulfill his destiny. A quiet legacy of wisdom and love passed down through the centuries. To fully comprehend the Deathly Hallows, we must look beyond the objects themselves and examine the powerful ideas they represent. These ideas have shaped not only the lives of their owners, but the very course of wizarding history, culminating in the great conflicts of the 20th century. Central to this is the symbol of the Hallows, a simple geometric design composed of a triangle containing a circle bisected by a vertical line. The line represents the Elder Wand. The circle represents the Resurrection Stone, and the enclosing triangle represents the Cloak of Invisibility. For most wizards, this symbol is obscure, a forgotten piece of arcane lore. But for a select few, it is a mark of belief, a sign used to identify fellow seekers on the quest for the Hallows. However, in the early 20th century, this ancient symbol was co-opted and twisted by one of the most dangerous dark wizards of all time, Gellert Grindelwald. During his meteoric rise to power, Grindelwald adopted the Hallows symbol as his personal mark. He carved it into a wall at his school, Durmstrang, and his followers began to use it, transforming it from a symbol of a philosophical quest into an emblem of his terrifying ideology of wizarding supremacy. For many in continental Europe who suffered under his reign, the symbol became what the swastika became for Muggles, a sign of hate, persecution, and mass murder. This is why, decades later, Viktor Krum would react with such visceral anger upon seeing Xenophilius Lovegood wearing the symbol at Bill and Fleur's wedding. To Krum, whose grandfather was murdered by Grindelwald, it was not a sign of a quaint legend, but the mark of a tyrant. Grindelwald's corruption of the symbol is a direct reflection of his corruption of the Hallows' true meaning. His quest was born in his youth, during a fateful summer in Godric's Hollow, spent with a brilliant young Albus Dumbledore. The two teenagers, both prodigiously talented and ambitious, became inseparable, bound by their shared intellect and a deep, intense affection. Together, they became obsessed with the Deathly Hallows, not as objects of study, but as tools for revolution. Their plan, which they codenamed For the Greater Good, was to unite the Hallows, become the Masters of Death, and lead a new wizarding order that would overturn the international statute of secrecy and establish benevolent wizarding rule over muggles. Dumbledore, chafing under the responsibility of caring for his traumatized sister Ariana, was seduced by this vision of power and freedom. He believed the Hallows would not only allow them to reshape the world, but would also give him the power to bring back his deceased parents, freeing him from his burdens. This arrogant and youthful ambition came to a tragic and abrupt end. Albus's younger brother, Aberforth, confronted the pair, arguing that Albus's plans were mad and that he was neglecting his duty to Ariana. The argument escalated into a furious three-way duel. The flashing lights and violent bangs of the spells triggered a catastrophic explosion of uncontrolled magic from the terrified Ariana, who had tried to intervene. In the chaos, a stray curse struck her and she fell dead. In the horrifying aftermath, Grindelwald fled, and the friendship between him and Dumbledore was shattered forever. Ariana's death became the defining moment of Dumbledore's life. It was the brutal, tragic consequence of his lust for power and his pursuit of the Hallows. From that day forward, their paths diverged. Grindelwald continued his quest for dominance, stealing the Elder Wand and beginning his dark reign. Dumbledore, consumed by guilt and a newfound understanding of his own weakness, renounced power. He dedicated his life to teaching and to fighting the very ideology he had helped create, understanding that true mastery came not from conquest, but from wisdom and restraint. The story of their youth is the ultimate cautionary tale, revealing that the quest for the Hallows represents a fundamental choice in the face of mortality. One can seek to conquer it through power, as Grindelwald did, or one can learn to accept it, as Dumbledore eventually did. This ancient lore was preserved in its own eccentric way by figures like Xenophilius Lovegood. As the editor of The Quibbler, Xenophilius was a fervent believer in the quest for the Hallows, and it was he who finally explained their meaning to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. He served as the crucial link, the keeper of the story who could pass its secrets to the next generation. Yet he too was tested by the Hallows themes. When his daughter, Luna, was kidnapped by Death Eaters, Xenophilius made the desperate choice to betray Harry in an attempt to save her. His actions, born of love and fear, echo the desperate choices of Cadmus Peverell and the young Albus Dumbledore, showing how the fear of loss can drive even good people to terrible deeds. Ultimately, the story culminates with Harry Potter, the boy who, unlike all who came before him, became the true master of all three Hallows without ever seeking them for power. His journey was the antithesis of Voldemort's and Grindelwald's. He inherited the cloak and used it for protection. He won the allegiance of the wand, not in a quest for glory, but in a desperate act of self-defense. And he was given the stone not to reverse death, but to find the courage to walk toward it. When Harry walked into the Forbidden Forest to sacrifice himself, he was, for that brief moment, the true and united master of the Deathly Hallows. And this reveals the final, most profound truth of the legend. To be the master of death does not mean to be immortal or invincible. That is the interpretation of the foolish and the arrogant, the reading of Antioch and Cadmus, of Grindelwald and Voldemort. The true master of death is one who accepts that mortality is an inescapable part of life, and who does not fear it. The three Hallows, when understood correctly, form a complete philosophical system for confronting our own end. The Elder Wand represents the futile attempt to defeat death through violence and power. The Resurrection Stone represents the equally futile attempt to reverse death through grief and longing, and the Invisibility Cloak represents the wise and humble path of accepting death, living a full life, and meeting it peacefully when the time comes. Harry, in his final moments, proves his mastery by confronting the temptations of all three Hallows and choosing the path of Ignotus. He uses the stone, not to bring his loved ones back to the world of the living, but to ask them to accompany him on his journey into death. He then willingly drops the stone, abandoning the temptation to cling to the past. He is the master of the Elder Wand, yet he chooses not to wield its immense power for his own gain, instead planning only to return it to Dumbledore's tomb, to let its power die with him. And finally, he takes off the Cloak of Invisibility, the very tool of evasion, and steps forward to face his end. In understanding all three paths and consciously choosing wisdom over power and acceptance over denial, Harry Potter finally solves the ancient riddle of the Peverell brothers. He becomes the true master of death, not by conquering it, but by greeting it as an old friend. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the lore of the Deathly Hallows.